Hello and welcome to Firstpost Spotlight, where we bring you stories that matter to you from all across the world. From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, we shed light on issues that shape our world. I'm Alison LaGrange, live from Durban, South Africa. Let's begin with the top headlines. Russia accuses Ukraine of launching rockets and over a dozen drones at its energy infrastructure, violating a 30-day ceasefire on such facilities. Israel bombs Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon after intercepting a rocket firing. The Iran-backed group denies the Israeli allegation. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez calls on US President Trump to reconsider the new tariffs announced recently and to open dialogue with the European Commission to solve the crisis. Death toll due to South Korea's worst ever wildfires reaches 28, despite light to moderate rainfall dousing part of the blaze. And Brazil's public prosecutor asks the Supreme Court to drop a probe against former President Jair Bolsonaro for allegedly falsifying COVID-19 vaccine certificates while in power. Hello and welcome. We begin with the powerful 7.7 magnitude earthquake that struck Myanmar and Thailand today. It caused widespread destruction and triggered panic as far as China. At least 28 people have been reported dead and over 100 remain missing. Thailand's Bangkok, which was nearly 900 kilometers away from the epicenter, witnessed widespread destruction after the tremors. A 30-story skyscraper collapsed as a result of the quake and reportedly trapped dozens of workers. Within seconds, the under-construction building was reduced to rubble. At least 3 people have been reported dead and at least 81 are missing. The earthquake caused multiple high-rises in Bangkok to sway. At one such hotel, water from a rooftop pool spilled onto the streets below. The powerful jolt sent residents across the many Thai cities flooding out into the streets in panic. The tremors also caused some metro and rail services to be temporarily suspended. Thailand Prime Minister has declared a state of emergency after an emergency meeting. The quake's epicenter was located 16 kilometers northwest of the Sagaing in Myanmar. A strong aftershock measuring 6.4 followed shortly. The Myanmar junta also declared a state of emergency in 6 regions after the quake. The impact was devastating, with reports of collapsed buildings and damaged infrastructure across Myanmar. In Mandalay, the historic Ava Bridge crumbled into the Irrawaddy River, while roads in the capital of Naypyidaw buckled under the force of the tremors. A leading hospital in Myanmar's capital of Naypyidaw has been designated a mass casualty area following the earthquake. Outside the 1,000-bed general hospital, rows of injured victims awaited treatment, some groaning in pain, others motionless. As worried relatives tried to comfort them, the junta chief Min Aung Hlaing has also visited the hospital to assess the situation. Myanmar, which sits on the seismically active Sagaing fault, has a long history of devastating earthquakes. Between 1930 and 1956, 6 major quakes of magnitude 7 or higher struck the region. More recently, in 2016, a 6.8 magnitude earthquake in the ancient city of Bagan killed 3 people and caused extensive damage to the historic temples. Despite the massive tremors, no tsunami warning has been issued. However, with Myanmar's fragile healthcare system already strained, concerns are growing over the country's ability to respond effectively to the crisis. The quake's effects extended into China's Yunnan province, with Beijing's Quake agency recording the jolt at a staggering 7.9 magnitude, while no immediate reports of casualties or severe damage have emerged from China. The quake was strong enough to be felt across the region, with Cambodia, Bangladesh and India all reporting tremors. As aftershocks continue to rattle the region, authorities across Myanmar, Thailand and China remain on high alert. Further updates on the disaster are expected as rescue operations and damage assessments continue. Now we move on with the geopolitical hot topic on top of everyone's minds since the US President Donald Trump's return to the White House: immigration. In the latest, the United States cancelled over 2,000 visa applications from India. The cancellations were attributed to alleged fraud-related activities. The US Embassy in New Delhi said that they detected a major violation of its appointment system by what it called the bad actors, or bots. Now, the American Embassy cited zero tolerance for agents and fixers that it said violate visa scheduling policies. Even before the latest crackdown on US visa applicants, a significant chunk of Indians heading to the US had been facing visa delays. Now, the worst affected bunch are the ones headed to the US for business purposes under the B1 visa. Indian tourists, as well as those intending to visit friends or family in the US, are also facing significant delays to get their B2 visas approved. The waiting period from the time of applying for a B1 or B2 visa till the time of interview at a consulate also remains critically high. As of last month, it was reported to be 440 days at the US Embassy and Consulate in New Delhi and Mumbai, 436 days in Chennai-based US Consulate, 429 days in Hyderabad, and 415 days in Kolkata. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has raised the issue of visa delays to both the US President Donald Trump and his predecessor Joe Biden in recent years. Now, New Delhi's repeated emphasis on mobility of talent between India and the US has succeeded in decreasing the waiting time from both the B1 and B2 visas, which was reported to be over 1,000 days in 2022 to 2023, as compared to over 400 days now in 2025. Now, the US says that through increasing staff at its consulates in India and by driving innovations and efficiency, it has managed to bring down the visa appointment wait times for Indians. But even with that, it can take over 400 days for the approval of a visitor, tourist or business visa of an Indian applicant. Now compare this to the visa processing time taken by other nations for Indian business visa applicants. The standard processing time for a UK business visa for Indians is around 3 weeks. Or for Australia, the processing time goes up to 4 weeks. It can take up to 45 days to get a German or a French business visa from India. And it usually takes just 5 to 10 working days to get a business visa to Japan from India. Now, the US attributes its high rate of visa delays on unprecedented number of applicants and applications that it receives from India. Now, in India, if you think that the wait for the approval of a visitor or business visa to the US is a lot, wait until you hear about the backlogs for green cards or immigrants on H-1B visas already in the United States. Now, the H-1B visa applicants in the US, most of whom hail from India, face several decades-long waiting time. In some cases, the wait time for a green card could be between 80 to 100 years. Most recently, US President Donald Trump paused the processing of certain green card applications, which is set to extend this already big waiting time even further. The move is a part of a broader immigration crackdown aimed at increasing scrutiny and national security checks. Now, the US cites security concerns for what sometimes is seen as dehumanizing scrutiny process of visa applications. Now, while these concerns may hold a degree of validity, they hurt the exact talent and innovation that the US relies on to be an economic powerhouse. Is this a lack of foresight for the economic benefits of a more efficient immigration process? Now, the political unrest in Turkey is far from over. The anti-government protests that began after the arrest of Istanbul's mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu, continue to escalate. On Thursday, residents of an Istanbul neighborhood were seen banging pots and pans in a mark of solidarity for protesters angered by İmamoğlu's arrest. Now, people stood by their windows and made loud noises with the kitchenware as marching protesters passed through the area. İmamoğlu, who is President Erdogan's biggest political rival, was jailed on the 23rd of March on corruption charges, which he denies. Now, Turkey's Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya has said that over 1,800 people had been detained since the protests erupted last Wednesday in response to İmamoğlu's initial arrest. Rights groups have called on Turkey to probe what they termed excessive force by police in dispersing crowds, and urged the government to allow peaceful protests. In another attempt to crack down on the anti-Erdogan protests, the Turkish media watchdog has imposed fines on 4 broadcasters over coverage related to İmamoğlu's arrest. Turkey's Radio and Television Supreme Council has issued sanctions against programs aired on pro-opposition channels for alleged violations. In addition to these sanctions, SZC-TV was ordered to halt broadcasting for 10 days. Turkish media watchdog also warned SZC-TV that a third violation could result in the revocation of its license. Doubling down on media crackdown over protest coverage, the Turkish authorities also deported an international media correspondent on Thursday after detaining him for 17 hours and branding him a threat to public order. The move to suppress the pro-opposition media was met with massive protests. Protesters and lawmakers from Turkey's main opposition party gathered outside the government's media watchdog's headquarters on Thursday to protest against its decision to fine broadcasters over protest coverage. Meanwhile, Turkish university students gathered for an 8th night in Istanbul as protests against İmamoğlu's arrest resumed. Demonstrators were seen chanting slogans and holding banners outside an Istanbul shopping mall. The protesters were later dispersed by the police. Now, Turkey is grappling with intense political turmoil, and the West is keenly observing it all. Commenting on the ongoing protests and media crackdown in Turkey, French President Emmanuel Macron said that France regrets Turkey's systematic attacks on freedoms.
Everyone knows the vicissitudes of these 75 years, but the systematic nature of the prosecutions against opposition and civil society figures, the attacks on freedom of information and assembly, the arrest and detention of the mayor of Istanbul very clearly constitute attacks and aggressions that one can only regret. In the name of history and in the name of a certain idea of Turkey and its relationship with Europe.
Reacting to the global backlash, Turkey's Justice Minister Yilmaz Tunç has rejected prejudiced statements from the international community over İmamoğlu's arrest and the nationwide protests in the country. Speaking to international media in Istanbul, Tunç has also said that Ankara had asked European countries to act with common sense on the matter. Turkish opposition supporters, rights groups and Western countries claim that İmamoğlu's arrest was a politicized effort to eliminate a potential electoral threat to Erdogan. However, the government continues to deny, condemn and suppress all such statements. As anti-government protests continue to escalate in Turkey, it remains to be seen how will the government reinstate normalcy and stability in the country. And in our final story, we take you to the Philippines. The Southeast Asian nation is countering Chinese attempts to dominate the region with swift crackdown on Beijing's alleged espionage attempts. Now, in the latest, the Philippines has charged 6 Chinese nationals with espionage for collecting intelligence on critical infrastructure and naval assets in the region. Filipino authorities say that the arrested Chinese nationals carried out covert intelligence operations, surveillance and reconnaissance activities in Grand Island, a former U.S. naval base about 35 miles northwest of Manila Bay. Filipino authorities say that Chinese nationals were operating in the area under the pretense of recreational fishing. Investigators said that the group was found flying high-tech drones in the area to monitor both Philippine and visiting American naval vessels. The 6 Chinese nationals were arrested in what the Philippines called a hot pursuit operation on the 19th of March. Manila says that the authorities found photographs and documents of the Filipino and American naval assets with the arrested individuals. The electronic gadgets seized from these alleged spies contain surveillance photos and videos along with fake identification cards. The arrests follow a series of similar incidents this year when Chinese nationals were caught attempting to gather intelligence in the West Philippine Sea. Last week, the Filipino authorities said that they found evidence of the prior presence of Chinese nationals with murky objectives on a ship in the Manila Anchorage area. But the 8 Chinese nationals had left the ship hours before the Filipino inspection. Manila's crackdown on Chinese espionage attempts intensifies as U.S. Defense Secretary visits the Southeast Asian nation, countering China. Now, earlier today, the U.S. Defense Secretary reaffirmed what he called American ironclad commitment with the Philippines as part of their mutual defense treaty. The message was directed at China that if Beijing proceeds with its expansionism to threaten Manila, Washington won't be a mute spectator.
Deterrence is necessary around the world, but specifically in this region, in your country, considering the threats from the Communist Chinese, and that friends need to stand shoulder to shoulder to deter conflict, to ensure that there's free navigation. Whether you call it the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea, we recognize that your country has stand very firm in that location and in defense of your nation.
Washington's support for Manila irked Beijing as it accused the U.S. of exaggerating what the two allies see as the growing Chinese threat to Filipino sovereignty. Beijing, however, did not clarify the spiraling spying row with the Philippines. China's continued espionage efforts in the Philippines expose its blatant disregard for international law and Filipino security. Despite mounting evidence of its covert operations, China's refusal to address these actions only deepens the mistrust. As the Philippines strengthens ties with the US, China's actions not only threaten Filipino sovereignty, but also disrupt stability in the Indo-Pacific. And that's all we have on the show for today. We will see you again at the same time on Monday. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to First Post.
From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, shedding light on the world's top headlines, detailed analysis on the stories that matter the most to you. Catch it all on Spotlight at 6 p.m. India time and 12:30 GMT, only on First Post.